HMP Whitemoor is not a prison designed to correct behavior. It is a prison designed to contain risk. Hidden in the flat, open landscape of Cambridgeshire, Whitemoor does not look dramatic from the outside. No towering cliffs. No ancient stone walls. No sense of history that announces itself. But this is one of the most tightly controlled environments in the United Kingdom. A place built for men the system believes cannot be trusted anywhere else. Whitemoor holds Category A prisoners, individuals classified as posing the highest possible threat to the public, the state, or national security. These are men whose escape would cause immediate and severe danger. Terrorists, organised crime figures, serial offenders, prisoners whose influence alone can destabilise entire wings. Inside Whitemoor, freedom is measured in inches. Every movement is regulated. Every interaction is observed. Every routine is designed to minimise unpredictability. This is not a prison where time passes quietly. It is a prison where time presses down. From the moment an inmate arrives, the message is clear. Whitemoor is about control. The intake process strips away any illusion of autonomy. Clothing is issued. Property is limited. Identity becomes a number attached to a location. Cells are assigned not for comfort, but for surveillance efficiency. The architecture itself reflects this purpose. Long corridors, reinforced doors, controlled sight lines, electronic locks that respond instantly to central commands. There are no blind corners by accident. No spaces left unmonitored by chance. Even the silence feels engineered. Most prisoners at Whitemoor spend the majority of their day inside their cells. Movement outside is scheduled, supervised, and limited. Association with other inmates is tightly managed, often restricted to small, carefully selected groups. Some prisoners are kept apart entirely, not for punishment, but to prevent influence, coordination, or violence. In Whitemoor, who you speak to matters. Who you look at matters. Who notices you matters. The prison operates under a constant risk assessment model. Every inmate is evaluated not just on behavior, but on potential. Potential to manipulate. Potential to organize. Potential to harm others without ever raising a hand. This is why Whitemoor is often described as psychologically heavier than physically violent. Violence does occur, but it is rarely chaotic. It is calculated, planned, quiet, and when it happens, the response is immediate and overwhelming. Officers are trained to de-escalate before force becomes necessary, but force is never far away. Control and restraint teams are on standby. Segregation units are always ready. A single incident can result in months of isolation. Segregation in Whitemoor is not dramatic. It is dull, repetitive, crushing. Days blend into each other with little change. Meals slide through slots. Conversations are brief and functional. Human contact becomes something that must be rationed. For some inmates, this environment is stabilizing. For others, it is suffocating. Mental health issues are common. Anxiety, paranoia, depression, not always caused by imprisonment, but amplified by it. The constant awareness of being watched alters behavior over time. Prisoners learn to control their expressions, their posture, even their breathing. Because attention can be dangerous. Whitemoor is not run by gangs in the way some prisons are. That does not mean influence doesn't exist. Power operates quietly here. Through reputation. Through history. Through perceived capability. Some inmates never need to raise their voice. Their presence alone shifts the atmosphere. Others try to make themselves invisible. Food becomes one of the few daily markers of time. Meals are basic, functional, designed for nutrition rather than comfort. Breakfast arrives early. Lunch is quick. Dinner comes before the day truly feels finished. There is no lingering over meals. No social dining culture. Eating is another process to be completed. For prisoners with canteen access, food also becomes currency. Items are traded, saved, combined. A small sense of control in a system that removes almost all of it. But nothing inside Whitemoor truly belongs to the inmate. Everything can be taken. Everything can be restricted. Everything can be reviewed. Even communication with the outside world is filtered. Phone calls are monitored. Letters are read. Visits are controlled and often conducted behind glass. Contact is permitted, but never private. Relationships strain under the weight of surveillance and distance. Families feel the pressure too. Officers at Whitemoor operate under constant tension. They are not dealing with impulsive offenders. They are dealing with calculated individuals, many of whom are patient, intelligent, and experienced in manipulation. Trust is a liability. Familiarity is a risk. Every instruction must be clear. Every routine must be followed exactly. Every deviation must be documented. The margin for error is small. This environment creates a unique dynamic. Prisoners test boundaries subtly. Officers respond firmly but professionally. A silent contest of control plays out every day in small ways, through compliance, resistance, and observation. Over time, White Moa reshapes behavior. Some inmates adapt by becoming hyperdisciplined. Others withdraw. Some grow more volatile under the pressure. The prison does not fix these responses. It manages them. That is its function. White Moa is not meant to be understood emotionally. It is meant to function reliably, to hold people who cannot be held anywhere else, to reduce risk to the outside world, even if that means concentrating it inside. For many prisoners, White Moa is not the end of their sentence, but it feels like it. Transfers are rare and dependent on long periods of compliance. Progress is slow. Privileges are earned in increments so small they can feel meaningless. Hope exists here, but it is muted. Because in White Moa, the system is not asking who you can become. It is asking what you must be prevented from doing. And that question governs everything. Daily life inside HMP Whitemoor follows a rhythm designed to eliminate surprise. Predictability is not comfort here. It is control. Each day begins early, not because productivity is encouraged, but because order must be maintained. Cell doors unlock and relock according to schedules set long before the prisoners wake. Officers conduct checks with practiced efficiency. Names are confirmed. Faces are counted. Presence is verified. Silence is often preferred. Movement through the prison happens in stages. Prisoners are escorted in small numbers, sometimes alone, depending on their risk classification. Routes are fixed. Timings are exact. Doors close behind one group before another is allowed to move. No one moves freely. Exercise is permitted, but never without structure. Outdoor yards are enclosed, watched from multiple angles. Inmates may walk, stretch, or stand in silence. Interaction is monitored. Conversations are overheard. Proximity is regulated. Some prisoners use this time simply to feel air that isn't filtered through concrete and steel. Others pace methodically, counting steps, measuring space. Even exercise becomes another form of adaptation. Inside the wings, cells are functional rather than punitive in appearance. A bed, a toilet, a sink, a small desk, limited personal items. Television access varies by privilege level. Radios are common. Silence, however, is constant. Sound travels differently in Whitemoor. Doors echo. Footsteps carry. A raised voice can be heard far beyond its source. Many inmates learn to speak quietly, not out of fear, but because attention attracts scrutiny. And scrutiny attracts consequences. The prison operates under what officers refer to as dynamic security. This means security is not only enforced through locks and barriers, but through constant observation and intelligence gathering. Officers watch behavior patterns. They note who associates with whom. They observe who avoids contact, who seeks it, and who controls conversations without appearing to. Information is power inside Whitemoor. Some inmates arrive already known to the system. Their reputations precede them. Others attempt to build influence slowly, carefully, through favors, communication, or intimidation that never quite crosses a visible line. The most dangerous prisoners are not always the loudest. Gang structures exist, but they are fragmented. Unlike lower security prisons, Whitemoor does not allow large groups to consolidate power openly. Alliances shift quietly. Influence operates through proximity, timing, and access rather than overt displays. This fragmentation is intentional. The prison's design makes collective action difficult. Wings are isolated. Schedules differ. Shared spaces are limited. When intelligence suggests potential coordination, inmates are separated preemptively. The goal is prevention, not reaction. Yet tension never disappears. It simmers. Staff shortages, common across the UK prison system, place additional pressure on Whitemoor's operations. Officers are often responsible for managing highly complex prisoners with limited resources. Fatigue is a constant factor. Vigilance must be maintained even when morale is low. Mistakes carry weight here. When incidents occur, they are rarely spontaneous. Assaults, when they happen, are often sudden and targeted. Weapons are improvised from everyday materials. Even controlled environments cannot eliminate ingenuity. After an incident, lockdowns follow. Movement stops. Cells close. The prison resets itself. For the prisoners involved, consequences are swift. Segregation, loss of privileges, extended isolation, reviews that can delay progression for years. Segregation at White Moa is not temporary inconvenience. It is psychological compression. Time stretches. Days become indistinguishable. The absence of stimulation becomes its own form of pressure. Some inmates deteriorate quickly. Others become unnervingly calm. Healthcare inside White Moa exists, but it operates within the limits of security. Mental health support is available, yet access can be delayed. Appointments are scheduled around staffing availability and risk assessments. Treatment happens, but slowly. This delay compounds existing issues. Many prisoners arrive with histories of trauma, addiction, or untreated mental illness. The prison manages risk, not recovery. Stabilization is the priority. Improvement is secondary. For those serving long or indeterminate sentences, the weight of time becomes heavy. Years pass marked by routine rather than progress. Appeals are rare. Transfers are uncertain. Release dates feel abstract. Hope becomes something prisoners must ration carefully. Family contact provides emotional grounding, but it also introduces pain. Visits are structured and limited. Physical contact may be restricted. Conversations happen under observation. Words are chosen carefully. Topics are avoided. Children grow up outside these walls. Relationships change. Some disappear entirely. Inside White Moa, inmates learn to compartmentalize their lives. Survival requires emotional control. Displays of weakness can invite exploitation. Displays of anger can trigger sanctions. The safest posture is neutrality. Officers. 2. Adapt. Professional distance becomes necessary. Empathy is balanced against caution. Familiarity is avoided. Boundaries are maintained not just for safety, but for mental endurance. This creates an environment where everyone is contained, inmates physically, staff psychologically. White Moa is often compared to other high-security prisons like Belmarsh or Frankland, but its atmosphere is distinct. Where Belmarsh is politically charged, White Moa is operationally focused. It is quieter, more clinical, less visible to the public eye. It is a prison that rarely makes headlines, by design. The absence of attention is part of its effectiveness. Without notoriety, there is less incentive for spectacle. Control remains internal. But that does not mean White Moa is static. The prison evolves constantly, responding to new threats, new offender profiles, and new intelligence. Security measures are updated. Protocols change. Surveillance improves. Yet the core philosophy remains unchanged. Containment above rehabilitation. Control above comfort. Prevention above reform. For some prisoners, White Moa represents the end of mobility within the system, a final holding point. For others, it is a test, a place where behavior is evaluated over years, not months. Progress is possible, but it is slow, incremental, and fragile. One mistake can erase years of compliance. This creates a paradox. Prisoners are expected to demonstrate change in an environment designed to restrict autonomy, to show responsibility without responsibility, to display growth without opportunity. Some succeed. Many do not. As years pass, White Moa leaves its mark. On posture, on speech, on how inmates respond to noise, authority, and uncertainty. The habits formed here do not fade quickly. Even those who eventually leave carry White Moa with them. Because HMP Whitemoor does not just confine bodies. It reshapes behavior. It conditions thought. And it reminds everyone inside that freedom, once removed, is not easily restored. Time behaves differently inside HMP Whitemoor. It does not move forward in milestones. It drifts. For prisoners serving long or indeterminate sentences, the future is not measured in dates, but in reviews. Category A status reviews. Risk assessments. Behavioral reports. Each one holds the possibility of movement or the certainty of stagnation. Category A is the highest security classification in the UK prison system. It is not a sentence. It is a label. And once applied, it is difficult to remove. Prisoners must demonstrate sustained compliance over years. Not weeks, not months, years. And even then, downgrading is never guaranteed. Inside White Moa, this creates a quiet tension. Inmates know they are constantly being evaluated. Every interaction is potentially evidence. Every incident, no matter how small, can be recorded and interpreted. A raised voice, a refusal, an association deemed questionable. All of it matters. Some prisoners respond by becoming model inmates. They follow every instruction. They avoid conflict. They isolate themselves voluntarily. Others reject the process entirely, convinced that compliance changes nothing. This divide shapes the social atmosphere. Those pursuing progression often avoid those who are not. Association becomes risk. Trust becomes dangerous. Relationships are transactional, temporary, and carefully managed. White Moa is not a place for alliances that last. The prison's management understands this dynamic and uses it deliberately. Incentives are minimal but meaningful. Extra phone time. Access to work roles. Limited education opportunities. These are not luxuries, they are leverage. But opportunity is always conditional. Education inside White Moa exists, but it is tightly controlled. Courses are basic. Attendance is selective. Movement to classrooms requires escort. Materials are limited. Knowledge is encouraged only insofar as it does not introduce risk. For some inmates, learning becomes a coping mechanism. For others, it feels irrelevant against the weight of their sentence. Work roles are similarly constrained. Cleaning duties, kitchen assistance, maintenance tasks, jobs that maintain the prison rather than prepare inmates for life beyond it. White Moa is not designed to reintegrate. It is designed to hold. Religion becomes one of the few spaces where emotional expression is permitted. Chaplaincy services operate under security oversight, but they offer a rare opportunity for reflection. Attendance varies. For some, faith becomes structure. For others, a temporary refuge from isolation. But even here, observation never stops. The physical environment reinforces this reality. Cameras cover nearly every angle. Blind spots are minimized. Lighting is constant. Doors do not slam. They lock with mechanical finality. There is no ambiguity in sound. Technology plays a central role in White Moa's control. Electronic locking systems allow officers to manage movement remotely. Alarms can seal entire wings in seconds. Communication between staff is constant. In emergencies, response teams move quickly and decisively. Yet technology does not replace human judgment. Officers must interpret behavior, predict risk, and make decisions that can escalate or diffuse situations. This responsibility weighs heavily. Mistakes here are not abstract. They are personal. Staff turnover reflects this pressure. Experience matters in White Moa, but burnout is real. New officers learn quickly or leave. Veteran officers develop instincts that are difficult to teach. Trust between staff is essential. And trust between staff and inmates is almost non-existent. This lack of trust defines the prison's culture. Every instruction is double-checked. Every compliance is observed for sincerity. Every calm moment is treated as provisional. Calm is not peace. It is containment holding. When intelligence suggests rising tension, White Moa tightens. Movement is reduced. Searches increase. Cells are inspected. Communication is limited. The prison contracts inward. This preventative approach has prevented large-scale disturbances, but it has not eliminated violence entirely. When violence occurs, it is often isolated and sudden. A strike in a corridor. An assault during movement. A weapon produced from materials thought harmless. Afterward, silence returns quickly. But the psychological residue remains. Prisoners involved in violence are often transferred to segregation or other facilities. Their absence is noted. Questions circulate quietly. Rumors fill gaps where information is withheld. Information control is deliberate. White Moa does not explain itself to inmates. Decisions are communicated, not justified. This reinforces authority but also fuels resentment. For some prisoners, resentment hardens into identity. The prison becomes an enemy rather than an environment. For others, resignation sets in. Both responses are forms of adaptation. As years pass, Some inmates become institutionalized in subtle ways. They struggle with unstructured time. They become anxious during rare moments of freedom. They rely on routine for stability. The outside world becomes abstract. News arrives filtered through television and conversation. Politics change. Technology advances. Social norms shift. Inside White Moa, time stands apart. This disconnection is not accidental. High-security prisons are designed to insulate society from risk. In doing so, they also insulate inmates from society itself. Release, when it comes, can be destabilizing. Former White Moa inmates often describe sensory overload. Noise feels aggressive. Crowds feel threatening. Choice feels overwhelming. The habits built inside do not dissolve easily. This raises an uncomfortable question. Does White Moa prepare prisoners for life beyond its walls, or simply contain them until release becomes unavoidable? The prison system rarely answers this directly. Public discourse around prisons like White Moa focuses on safety, on protection, on preventing the worst-case scenario. Rehabilitation is discussed, but rarely prioritized, because White Moa exists for those the system believes cannot fail. Failure here is too costly. This reality shapes every decision, every policy, every restriction, and it creates a prison that is efficient, controlled, and deeply isolating. A prison where silence is safer than speech, where compliance is survival, where time is both the punishment and the pressure. HMP Whitemoor does not promise change. It promises containment. And for Britain's most dangerous prisoners, that promise defines everything. HMP Whitemoor exists largely outside public attention, and that is not accidental. Unlike some high-profile prisons that regularly appear in headlines, Whitemoor operates quietly. There are no guided tours, no public-facing narratives, very few official images. The prison's power comes from its invisibility. Silence is part of its design. Information about Whitemoor is tightly controlled. Staff are restricted in what they can say. Inmates are limited in what they can communicate. Even incidents that would generate major attention elsewhere often pass with minimal public detail. This absence of visibility allows the prison to function without constant scrutiny. But it also creates distance. The public knows Whitemoor exists, but rarely understands what actually happens inside. That distance shapes policy. Decisions made here are driven almost entirely by risk calculations. Public opinion plays little role. Political pressure is muted. The prison's mandate is simple: prevent escape, prevent coordination, prevent harm. Everything else is secondary. This makes Whitemoor fundamentally different from prisons focused on rehabilitation or reintegration. Here, the priority is not preparing inmates for society. It is protecting society from inmates. That distinction explains many of Whitemoor's harshest features: extended isolation, restricted association, limited progression pathways. These are not oversights. They are deliberate. Whitemoor has held inmates connected to terrorism, organized crime, and extreme violence. Some arrived with national security concerns attached to their names. Others earned their classification through repeated failures in other high-security prisons. Their presence reinforces the prison's philosophy. One failure here would not be contained within the walls. It would reverberate outward. This pressure weighs on staff as much as inmates. Officers operate knowing that any lapse could carry national consequences. This creates an environment where caution overrides compassion, where strictness is not just encouraged, but required. Over time, this shapes behavior. Staff become procedural. Interactions become minimal. Emotional distance becomes a survival tool. The result is a prison that functions efficiently, but impersonally. For inmates, this impersonality can feel dehumanizing. They are managed, not engaged. Observed, not understood. Evaluated, not encouraged. Some respond by internalizing the system's expectations. They become quiet, compliant, invisible. Others resist passively. They withdraw, refuse engagement, stop participating in programs, accept stagnation as inevitable. Both responses are shaped by the same environment. High-security imprisonment does not offer many paths forward. Progress is slow, and setbacks are immediate. A single incident can erase years of perceived improvement. This creates fear of action. Inmates learn that doing nothing is often safer than doing something. Silence becomes protection. Stillness becomes strategy. The prison reinforces this behavior unintentionally. Those who cause no problems receive fewer interventions, less attention, less scrutiny. In a place where attention can lead to consequences, this feels like safety. But it comes at a cost. Long-term isolation and emotional suppression affect mental health. Anxiety becomes constant. Sleep patterns deteriorate. Hypervigilance becomes the norm. Even in moments of calm, the body remains tense. The mind does not rest easily in White Moa. Healthcare staff recognize these effects, but their ability to intervene is limited. Treatment plans must align with security requirements. Movement to appointments requires escort. Sessions are brief. Follow-ups can be delayed. Care exists, but it is constrained. The system stabilizes rather than heals. For some inmates, this is enough. Stability prevents collapse. For others, it deepens internal fractures. White Moa does not distinguish between these outcomes. It is not built to. The prison's role is containment, not resolution. This raises difficult questions about the purpose of high-security incarceration. If individuals are deemed too dangerous to engage, too risky to rehabilitate, and too threatening to trust, what is the long-term objective? Indefinite management. This is the unspoken reality of White Moa. Many prisoners here will spend decades under intense restriction. Some will eventually be downgraded. Others will not. The criteria for change are opaque, and perception matters as much as behavior. This uncertainty shapes identity. Prisoners begin to see themselves not as people with futures, but as problems to be managed. That self-perception can be hard to undo. Even release does not erase it. Former inmates often carry White Moa's habits with them. They scan rooms automatically. They avoid crowds. They struggle with unstructured time. Silence feels safer than conversation. Freedom feels unstable. This is not unique to White Moa, but the intensity of control accelerates the effect. The prison leaves marks that are not visible. From the outside, White Moa appears orderly, calm, controlled. And it is. But that calm is manufactured through constant pressure. Pressure on inmates to comply. Pressure on staff to perform. Pressure on the system to never fail. There is no room for error. This makes White Moa effective in one sense. Escapes are extremely rare. Large-scale disturbances are almost non-existent. Serious incidents are contained quickly. But effectiveness comes with trade-offs. Human complexity is simplified. Risk overrides nuance. Control replaces connection. Whether this is justified depends on perspective. Supporters argue that White Moa protects the public from individuals who have demonstrated extreme danger. Critics argue that prolonged isolation and control create long-term harm that extends beyond prison walls. The prison does not resolve this debate. It exists because the debate exists. As long as society believes some individuals cannot be trusted anywhere else, prisons like White Moa will continue to operate quietly, efficiently, and out of sight. They will not make headlines unless something goes wrong. And that is precisely the point. White Moa is designed not to be seen, not to be understood, only to function. And in that function, it reveals something uncomfortable about the justice system that built it. When fear outweighs faith in change, control becomes the answer. And White Moa is control, perfected. Inside HMP Whitemoor, the idea of change is treated cautiously, not because it is impossible, but because it is considered dangerous to assume. Every inmate here has already failed the system at least once. Many have failed it repeatedly. That history follows them into every assessment, every review, every decision made about their future. Past behavior is never truly past inside Whitemoor. It is always present, always relevant. Risk, once assigned, lingers. This creates a prison environment where progress must be proven continuously, and even then, it is questioned. An inmate may go years without incident, yet still be viewed through the lens of what they once did. Compliance is expected, but trust is withheld. For prisoners serving life sentences or indeterminate sentences, this reality can feel suffocating. Time stretches forward without clear landmarks. Reviews come and go. Language in reports is cautious, non-committal. Some improvement noted. Risk remains. Further observation required. These phrases become familiar. They are not promises. They are pauses. In response, many inmates stop aiming for change and instead aim for stability. They follow routines rigidly. They avoid notice. They exist within the system rather than pushing against it. Others take a different path. They challenge decisions through legal avenues, appeals, complaints. This process is slow and emotionally draining. Outcomes are uncertain. Rejections are common. Persistence becomes its own burden. White Moa does not encourage resistance. It absorbs it. Every challenge is logged. Every appeal becomes part of the record. Even justified complaints can reinforce perceptions of difficulty. The system is patient. It can wait longer than the prisoner. This imbalance of time defines life here. The prison does not rush. It does not react emotionally. It observes, records, and decides when it is ready. For inmates, this can feel like stagnation. For the institution, it feels like caution. Both perspectives exist simultaneously. Daily routines reinforce this imbalance. Days are structured, but repetitive. Weeks blend together. Seasons change quietly. The outside world feels distant, abstract. Television provides glimpses of society moving forward. New technologies appear. Cultural shifts occur. Inside White Moa, these changes are experienced passively. Inmates adapt by narrowing focus. Today's tasks matter. Tomorrow's schedule matters. Long-term thinking becomes exhausting. Some inmates deliberately stop thinking about the future. It hurts less that way. This withdrawal is not despair. It is self-protection. Human beings are not designed to live under constant evaluation without resolution. Over time, the mind seeks equilibrium. In White Moa, equilibrium often means emotional flattening. Feel less. Expect less. React less. The prison does not demand this explicitly. It emerges naturally from prolonged exposure to control. Staff notice this effect. Some see it as compliance. Others see it as deterioration. The line between the two is thin. Mental health teams attempt to intervene where possible, but capacity is limited. Demand outweighs availability. Security considerations delay care. Support exists, but it arrives slowly. In emergencies, response is immediate. But long-term psychological strain does not always qualify as urgent. It accumulates quietly. White Moa's isolation amplifies this accumulation. The prison's location, far from major urban centers, limits external engagement. Volunteers are few. Programs are limited. Opportunities for outside connection are rare. This reinforces the prison's inward focus. Everything that matters happens inside the walls. Even staff are affected by this isolation. Working at White Moa is not like working at other prisons. The stakes feel higher. The atmosphere is heavier. The margin for error is smaller. Officers carry that weight home. Burnout is common. Emotional distance becomes a coping mechanism. Some officers remain for years, developing deep expertise. Others leave quickly, unable to sustain the pressure. Turnover disrupts continuity. New officers require training. Experience gaps emerge. Veteran staff compensate where they can. The system absorbs this instability, but it does not eliminate risk. Every institution depends on people, and people have limits. Despite this, White Moa continues to function. It holds. It contains. It prevents. From a purely operational perspective, it succeeds. But success measured only by containment ignores secondary consequences. The men inside White Moa will not remain there forever. Some will be transferred. Some will be released. Some will age into lower risk categories. The habits formed here will follow them. The question is not whether White Moa keeps society safe today. It does. The question is what happens tomorrow. Does prolonged control create individuals capable of re-entering society, or does it produce people conditioned to survive only within rigid systems? There is no simple answer. Supporters argue that White Moa deals with exceptional cases, that the risks involved justify extreme measures, that public safety must come first. Inside the prison, these debates feel distant. What matters is routine, safety, survival. navigating another day without incident. Inmates learn to read the environment. They sense shifts in staff mood. They notice changes in schedules. They interpret small signals. Adaptation is constant. For some, this adaptation becomes mastery. They learn exactly how to behave, when to speak, when to remain silent. They progress slowly, carefully. For others, adaptation fails. Frustration builds. Incidents occur. Consequences follow. Isolation deepens. White Moa does not bend easily. It waits. This patience is its strength and its flaw. It allows the prison to absorb pressure without collapsing. But it also delays change until it becomes unavoidable. Whether White Moa will evolve in the coming years remains uncertain. Prison policy shifts. Public attitudes change. Resources fluctuate. But the core principle remains firm. White Moa exists to prevent the worst outcomes. And as long as that remains the priority, everything else will remain secondary. Control will outweigh comfort. Security will outweigh rehabilitation. Containment will outweigh hope. This is the reality of HMP Whitemoor. Not dramatic, not chaotic, but relentless. HMP Whitemoor does not announce its presence to the world. It does not demand attention. It simply exists, continuing its work quietly, day after day, holding people society has decided cannot be trusted anywhere else. By the time most inmates reach Whitemoor, they already understand what it represents. They know this is not a place of second chances in the traditional sense. It is not a stepping stone. It is a holding point, a destination defined not by rehabilitation goals, but by risk tolerance. Here, the system does not ask who you want to become. It asks what you might do if given the opportunity. That single question governs everything. Inside Whitemoor, lives are reduced to assessments and probabilities. Not because the people inside lack complexity, but because complexity itself is considered dangerous. Nuance creates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates risk. And risk is what Whitemoor exists to eliminate. For prisoners, this reality reshapes identity. Over time, many stop seeing themselves as individuals with futures and begin seeing themselves as liabilities being managed. This shift is subtle, but profound. It affects how they speak, how they move, how they think. Hope does not disappear entirely, but it becomes cautious, controlled, measured. Some inmates still plan for the future, even if that future feels distant or unlikely. Others stop planning altogether, choosing instead to survive one day at a time. Neither approach is wrong. Both are responses to an environment that offers little reassurance. Whitemoor does not reward optimism. It rewards predictability. For staff, the prison becomes a world unto itself. Working here means operating under constant awareness that failure is not an option. The consequences of mistakes are too severe. Public scrutiny may be rare, but internal accountability is relentless. Officers learn to trust procedures over instincts, to rely on structure over emotion, to maintain distance not out of cruelty, but necessity. This distance protects them, but it also isolates them. Over time, the boundary between professional detachment and emotional numbness becomes difficult to define. Some officers manage this balance for years. Others burn out quickly. The prison absorbs both outcomes. The system continues. From the outside, Whitemoor can appear successful. There are no frequent riots, no regular escapes, no daily headlines. Order is maintained. Risk is managed. Society remains protected. By those metrics, the prison works. But success measured only by containment ignores the human cost, the psychological toll of prolonged isolation, the erosion of social skills, the quiet accumulation of stress and anxiety that does not disappear when doors finally open. When prisoners leave Whitemoor, whether through transfer or release, they do not simply step back into society. They carry Whitemoor with them, in posture, in habits, in reactions to noise, authority, and uncertainty. Freedom can feel disorienting. The structure that once constrained them also defined them. Without it, some struggle to adjust. Choices feel overwhelming. Crowds feel threatening. Silence feels safer than conversation. This is not failure on their part. It is conditioning. High-security prisons like Whitemoor shape behavior because they must. But shaping behavior for containment does not always translate to life outside. This tension sits at the heart of the debate surrounding Whitemoor and prisons like it. How much control is necessary to protect society? And at what point does control undermine the very rehabilitation it claims to support? There are no simple answers. What is clear is that White Moa reflects a broader philosophy within the justice system, a belief that some risks are too great to manage through trust, that some individuals must be contained rather than engaged. This belief did not emerge in isolation. It was shaped by violence, escape attempts, and public fear. It is reinforced by political pressure and media scrutiny. It persists because alternatives feel uncertain. And uncertainty is what systems like White Moa are designed to eliminate. Yet even the most controlled environments cannot eliminate humanity entirely. Inside White Moa, people still think, feel, adapt, and change, sometimes in ways the system anticipates, sometimes in ways it does not. Some inmates demonstrate genuine transformation over time. Others harden further. The prison records these outcomes, but it does not always understand them. Understanding is not its role. White Moa is not a place of answers. It is a place of containment. It exists to hold, to manage, to prevent. And in doing so, it reveals something fundamental about how society deals with fear. When fear becomes dominant, control becomes the solution. When control becomes the solution, environments like White Moa become inevitable. This does not make White Moa evil. It makes it honest. It is a prison built without illusion. A system that does not pretend every problem can be fixed. A place that acknowledges its limits and operates within them. Whether that approach is sustainable in the long term remains an open question. As populations age, as attitudes shift, as understandings of mental health evolve, prisons like White Moa may face pressure to adapt. Or they may remain unchanged, protected by the very risks they are designed to contain. For now, White Moa continues. Quietly, methodically, unseen. It stands as a reminder that behind the debates, the policies, and the headlines, there are places where control is not a theory but a daily reality. Places where freedom is not debated, but absent. Places where time is not marked by progress, but by compliance. HMP Whitemoor is one of those places. And as long as society believes some dangers cannot be managed any other way, it will remain exactly as it is, locked, controlled, and out of sight.